Hey everybody, I'm Autumn and I'm an alcoholic. I'll start with a few things. My sobriety date is September 15th, 2009. I have a home group and a sponsor, and I have sponsees and all that good stuff back in Greensboro. I was born in Greensboro in 1977, so I'm 35 years old. I was born into a family. I had two older brothers. My mom and dad were married. I don't remember a lot of my childhood as far as being a small kid. I remember when I turned into the teenage years, but I do know that my dad and mom got divorced when I was about 5, and my dad stayed in my life. I went every other weekend. You know, I had two older brothers that I looked up to and looked after me, and you know, my mom was a single mom up until I was about 11, and my brothers helped her with me while she worked and did all that stuff. And it was funny because my mom turned into this very religious, church going. She worked in a church. We were in a church 3 times a week. And then my dad was the partier and was not going to walk into a church. And so it was like living 2 different lives. When I was with my dad, it was one atmosphere, and then when I was with my mom, it was another. And from my first memories, the most intriguing one was my dad's. It seemed a lot more fun than sitting in church. He seemed to be a lot more carefree and a lot more fun to hang out with. And he was remarried. He remarried when I was like 6. And I'll give you an idea, my stepmom is in the program now, and she's got about 13 years. But so they were big partiers. There was a lot of drinking. He lived on a lake. There was big parties every weekend. I was there with all his friends and my aunts and different stuff like that. And for a while, my brothers went with me every other weekend, but my brothers are 5 and 9 years older than me, so I was the baby. And I remember when I was about 8 or 9 years old, my brothers started acting out and partying and doing things. And I can remember this plain as day as telling my mom, I would never do that to you. I will never be that person. You know, I'll never do and make the decisions they were making when they were running away and getting arrested and all that stuff. And then I guess it was when I was 11, my mom remarried. And so I had my 2 older brothers, and he had 3 kids that were older than me. So at this point, I have 5 older siblings that were all at least 5 years older than me. So I started seeing them all just bloom into the party life. I guess you'd say they were all, each one of them was quite wild. And about 6 months after my mom got married, my stepfather started abusing me. And, well, let me say this first. There is quite a bit of trauma in my story. And I don't tell this as an excuse to why I'm an alcoholic or, you know, why I drank the way I did or did any of the things I did. I tell it because I never thought there would be a point that I could live with those memories and not be numb with alcohol or something else. And today I am. So, anyway, so when I was 11, I was being sexually abused by my stepfather. And, you know, the first time it happened, I went and told. And, you know, I don't remember being scared, but I remember being mad that he did this to me. You know, I don't remember any other feeling except for anger when it happened. And I called my stepmom, and I told her, and she told my dad, and he told my mom, and we left the house immediately and went and got a hotel. And about a week later, my mom took me to this person's house, and the pastor was there and people from the church. And they gave me my first lesson of forgiveness. And I was told to forgive them and that God would forgive them, so I should. And we moved back into the house. And so what happened was it continued. And at that point is when I did feel fear instead of just anger, because I felt like I had told and I was not being protected. And it was about 13 years old, I think, is when I first drank. I don't remember the very first time I drank, but I know that as soon as I did it the first time, it was repetitive. It was every weekend, and then it was after school, and then it was whose house has a liquor cabinet. And by the time I was 14, I was staying in hotels on the weekend. I had found an older crowd that could get alcohol very easily. And so that was my escape. And the only time I felt at peace, I think, was when I was drinking. Otherwise, I was scared, I was angry, I didn't know what was going to happen when I went to bed at night, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I started, you know, skipping school and running away from home and different things. And the solution that my mom found was to move me out of the house and move me to my dad's. And I remember being upset about it because I didn't want to leave everything I knew because he didn't live in Greensboro. But at the same time, it was like I was relieved that, 1, I was going to be out of the house, and 2, I could go and create a life of whatever I wanted. I could be somebody different at this point. Nobody knew anything about me. Nobody knew anything about the abuse. Nobody knew how I partied. And so, like, that day, they moved me when I was told. And I moved out there, and my dad traveled a lot with his job, so it was me and my stepmom, who was very much in alcoholism at the time. And I had a little brother there that I think was like 1 or 2. And within a month, we moved to Florida for a job that my dad got. And so when I started school there, I really went in with the mindset, I'm going to do something different. I'm not going to drink. I'm going to like really do schoolwork and actually go to class and listen and all that stuff. And I think it was less than a month that I had dropped out of school, because I found the exact same people there, and, you know, that I had nothing to substitute the alcohol for. You know, I had no program, I had no guide, I had no therapy, I had nothing to kind of take care of what all had happened. So I went back to what I knew, which was alcohol. And I guess it was right before I turned 15, I had been running away a lot, and the police would pick me up and take me to my dad's, and then I'd leave again, and I hooked up with this crowd that was quite a bit older than me, and they pretty much just ran the streets. So at about right before I turned 15, I decided to live on the streets. And I was homeless, living on the streets for about 3 years. And all kinds of stuff happened, you know. There's stuff I did, there's stuff that was done to me. But throughout, I was thinking about this earlier today, throughout all that stuff, I mean, I was raped, I was kidnapped, I was shot at, I ate out of dumpsters, you know, I slept in dumpsters. All that felt better than having to go and live somewhere where I didn't feel safe. Like, I felt safer on the streets. The fact that I could drink and use or do whatever anytime I wanted to was more appealing than living a normal teenage life, which just blows my mind, because I have a 17-year-old now, and the thought of her doing any of that scares me pretty bad. But there were different points. There was one point where, you know, it was like a pack of us. It was like maybe 6 or 7 of us that kind of roamed the streets together, and we slept on the beaches, and part of it was fun and exciting, and then part of it was scary and miserable. But, you know, I would get arrested, and they would take me back, and there came a time where I was arrested, and they couldn't get in touch with my dad, so they were going to call my mom in Greensboro. So when they were going to do that, I told them what had happened here, and that I could not go back to Greensboro. So at that point, they got the police involved in DSS, and my dad finally showed up and got me, and, you know, the cycle continued, and I ran away. And then I guess I was like 16, and my best friend that I kind of ran the streets with, he was like an older brother. You know, he never tried to cross the line with me. He was never inappropriate. He always made sure that I fell asleep first, and then I was taken care of. We had been up for a few days, and we were drinking heavily, and we were sitting on a bed, and he had a gun in his hand, which was not abnormal, you know. I mean, it is, but it wasn't to me at the time. It's not normal at all, but in my world it was. Anyway, just spur of the moment, he took the gun, shot himself in the head. And I just ran as far as I could, as hard as I could. I don't know where I went. I remember being in the woods at one point. I remember finally hooking up with other people in our group, and he went to the hospital, and he didn't make it. But and then I was at his funeral, and I got arrested at his funeral, and I made this huge scene at his funeral, you know, and it was just a mess. And when that happened, it wasn't fun anymore. You know, I was just so miserable, and it was like I was drinking to numb so many different things at that point. And I think I stayed there for about another 6 months before I finally came back to Greensboro. And when I came back to Greensboro, well, I came back once before that, and they were trying to do charges, and they wanted me to go to court and all that, and I ran away and went back to Florida. And also at this time, you know, drugs are a part of my story, and I talk about it because it's where my alcoholism took me. You know, I don't think I would have become a junkie if I didn't start off with alcohol. But I ran away, and I went back to Florida, and about 6 months later, I think I came back for good, and my mom finally decided to leave my stepdad. He did not get charged while I was gone. Everything was kind of just, I don't know what happened to everything. It was just swept under a rug, I guess. But so come to find out, I moved in with my mom, and at this point I'm 17, and I guess in my mind the only thing I thought that could fix me was what I had saw her do, which was church. So I tried to get really involved in church. I worked at a church daycare. I was like leading the youth group, talking about being addicted to drugs, even though I had no idea what the solution was or what recovery was about. I just kind of faked my way through it, I think, and it didn't last long. But I met a guy, and I got pregnant and got married, and before I turned 18, I had come back to Greensboro, tried to get clean and sober, got pregnant, got married, and was a wife and a mom. And, you know, when I was pregnant, I thought, this is it. This is what's going to change my life. This is what's going to make me a different person, and this is going to be a strong enough force to keep me from doing all the things I've done for so many years. And I just, you know, I remember the day she was born and just holding her and thinking, you know, I'm going to love her more than anybody has ever loved me. And I did. I wanted to be the best mom I could, and I read books, and I tried to, you know, do all this positive stuff with her. And then I had another daughter about a year and a half later, and about 6 months after she was born, I guess I was 21, and it hit me that most 21-year-olds were not pregnant with 2 kids. And they were living a completely different life than I was, and I was missing out. What didn't hit me is I had already done all those things, and I had already partied and drank and lived that life way past what most 21-year-olds were doing. But I felt like I was missing something, you know. And that's when the point in my life became where my kids were not a strong enough power to keep me away from alcoholism. And I left my husband, and I had both kids. And I'd started drinking, you know, a little bit, and I thought, well, as long as I just drink and I don't go any further than drinking, I'll be okay. And we were going to court, and I got arrested for assault and battery on him, his mom, and his dad. So don't let this size fool you. So I went to jail, and I ended up staying in there for like a week because it was domestic violence, and it was just craziness. And he got emergency custody of the girls because of it. And I got out of jail, and I didn't see them for like a month, which was, you know, what else am I going to do? I can't see my kids. I'm going to go party. And I partied for a month, and I got right back where I was when I came back to Greensboro. And within just a few months, I was, you know, we were going to court. I was trying to get joint custody or full custody. I was then able to have them half of the week, and he had them the other half. And then it turned into, well, I'll get them next weekend. I can't get them this weekend. Or I'll get them in a few days because, you know, I got to work. I'm a single mom now. And then it eventually became where I was only seeing them every couple months, and I wasn't going to court dates, and I just threw my hands up and walked away from them. And I started bartending, which was the most brilliant idea I ever had, was to just go straight into there. And so I didn't, you know, he automatically got full custody, and I had rights every other weekend. I didn't use those rights, but I had them. There were times where I would get them, you know, every other weekend, and usually what that meant was I drank for the 5 days before, or I guess 13 days before they came, and then the 2.5, 3 days that they were there, I was basically recovering. I was not getting off the couch. I was not being a mom. I was not being social with them. And, you know, they're toddlers, and my oldest daughter was pretty much at 3 and 4 years old taking care of her little sister when they were at my house. And, you know, we rotated holidays, and there was Christmases that I never woke up. Or I woke up, I remember once I woke up at night and was like, oh my God, Christmas is in a little bit. And they were like, nah, you missed it. Like, they had already did Santa Claus and opened presents and all that stuff. And that did give me a lot of guilt, and I was determined not to do that again. So then what I started doing was Christmas Eve, everybody would come to my house, and we would drink all night while we put the Christmas presents together. And so then my kids watched Drunk Santa Claus, you know. And, you know, most of the time when they were with me, I was hungover if I wasn't drinking. And then it became that even though they were there, I still needed to drink, and I would take them to my mom. Or then it became when they were old enough, they would just take care of themselves. And I guess when about, let's see, she's 8, so 9 years ago, I was bartending, and a guy walked into the bar that was the guy that used to get me the hotel rooms when I was 14. And I thought, oh my God, it's fate. There is a God. Like, here he is. He's going to save me. Life is going to be okay, you know. And I think we moved in together like the next day. And it worked out real good because we drank the same way for a while. And I was a bartender, and, you know, he wanted to be in a bar, so we were together all the time, whether I was working and he was there or I was home and we were drinking. But I remember there finally came a point where he was like, you got a problem. This isn't right. Like, there comes a time where you just kind of slow down a little bit. And I had no desire to do that with him. And then I got pregnant again. And through my pregnancy, I didn't use any drugs, and I didn't drink liquor, and I drank O'Doul's, and then I drank red wine because I was read somewhere that was okay. Which my red wine drinking was bartending and having a styrofoam cup like that full of red wine. And I bartended up until the day that I gave birth. And she was born, and, I couldn't do the breastfeeding thing because then I couldn't drink. And then I guess she was about 6 months old when I started going really hard again. And when she was about 3 or 4, we left her dad, and I thought this time I was doing something better than I did last time because I brought my kid with me. So I was still being a mom. So I wasn't as bad as I used to be, was the thought that I had. What I didn't realize is just because I physically had her in custody, I was still not being a mom. There was the last year of my drinking, she never slept in her bed. I had 3 people in my life that I basically rotated her through, where I would take her to one, pick her up, take her to the next, and she didn't spend a night in her bed. And the reason I know this is because we moved into this apartment, and the whole time I lived in that apartment, I cannot remember her being there at night. And I was still bartending, and then I got another job, which I considered a real job, and I was working in the apartment industry, and I was trying to do both, because when you drink like I do, you got to have a job for drinking, and then you got to have a job for living. And very quickly, the job that was, my career job was in jeopardy, and I had a sit down with the regional, and she told me that I had to quit my job at the bar, and she put me on like a 60-day probation to get my act together. And she talked to me about my drinking, which I thought was very unprofessional. My drinking wasn't unprofessional, but for her to point it out was very unprofessional. She crossed some boundaries there. But anyway, later to find out her dad was an alcoholic, and that was why. But anyway, so I was supposed to quit my job at the bar, and at this point, I had lost apartments, I had cars repoed, I couldn't pay any bills. There was a point, the bar I worked at, I walked into work one Sunday, and I think it was football season, so I usually got there early, and I walked in, and all my regulars were sitting there. And I'm like, what's going on? And they were there to do an intervention on me. Just, and I didn't even think it was crazy then, I just thought, oh, y'all are so funny, And even at one point, one of the guys that had been a regular at mine at a few different bars, he offered to pay my rent and my car payment because he knew how far back I had gotten if I would not drink for 30 days. And I was like, oh, I got that. And within, I think, like 6 hours of making the bet, I had convinced him into giving me 3 days to drink. I had already started drinking for one of those days. And within that week, I had, probably in 3 days, I used those 3 days. But so needless to say, I didn't win that bet. But that same month, I wrecked my car. I was trying to leave an apartment complex, and I couldn't figure out what was the entrance and what was the exit. So I just went through the middle, which was brick. And so I tried to back my car up, and I tried to ride on 3 wheels, and got to the apartment that I had left, and went back inside and tried to forget what happened. Let's just forget about it. And I tried to make myself go to sleep. And then there was a knock at the door, and it was the police, and they were like, did you get in a wreck? And I'm like, no, I'm sleeping. And he was like, really? Do you have a silver Altima? Yeah? Come look at it. And so I walked out there, and my car was like tore up. I don't even know how I got it from the entrance to the apartment. But anyway, he sat me in his car for a couple hours and lectured me, and told me he was just going to write me a ticket for property damage, basically. And asked me a bunch of questions about my life and what was going on in that apartment, and if I was in danger, and why I was drinking the way I was drinking, and gave me suggestions of ways to change my life. And this was my chance my wake-up call, and so then he left, and I got a rental car, and then I drove the rental car to a bar and drove drunk in that rental car for a week. So it's like nothing even clicked, I was just like, oh, well, there's another problem. There's poor me, my life sucks, and I get hit with all this stuff. And I think it was only a couple months after that happened that I was sitting in my apartment, and I don't know how long I had been there. It seems like it was a couple days, but it could have been a couple hours. There's no telling. But I know that no matter how much I drank or how much I put of anything in my body, I could not get numb. I could not stop this. It was just, normally I could get to a point where I didn't care about anything that was going on in my life, and that night I could not do it. And I couldn't remember where my daughter was. So I didn't know who to call about picking her up the next day. And I went into like panic mode, and I had when those regulars tried to do the intervention, there was one guy there that I had noticed through bartending that he never drank. He only drank Red Bull, and he played the Mega Touch and watched football. And the reason why was because he was an alcoholic. And so that night I called one of those people that were there, and I was just sobbing, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I don't know what's wrong with me, and I'm scared. I'm going to lose my daughter. I don't even know where she's at. They're going to take her. And he said, hang up the phone, and somebody's going to call you, and I want you to answer the phone. And I did, and I talked to this guy, and he was trying to get me to go to treatment, and I tried to explain to him that was not possible because I was a mother, and I was doing such a good job taking care of my kid that I could not leave her and go to treatment. Then I think he asked me to call him the next morning and meet him for coffee. And I went to work that morning for a little bit, and I was reeking of alcohol, and my manager looked at me and she said, the regional's coming today, you probably should leave. And so I called him and I met him for coffee, and he told me a little bit about him and when and why he stopped drinking. And then he told me, would you be willing to go to a meeting? And I knew a little bit about Alcoholics Anonymous. My brothers had probably been in like 20 rehabs apiece. And so I had heard their version of what Alcoholics Anonymous was and what programs were and all that. So I had like this little idea in my head of what it was about, and I thought, okay, I'll go listen to these people. And so he told me, the men stick with the men and the women stick with the women, and if you're willing, I'll call this lady and she'll meet you at a meeting. And for some reason, I have no idea, because it was not natural thinking for me, I said, okay. And I got in my car and I met her at a meeting. And I remember walking in there, and there was this guy speaking, and I can see him and hear his story like it was yesterday. I have not seen him since. But he was telling his story, and he was talking about as a kid, he was running the streets, and he cared more about alcohol and drugs, that he was willing to be homeless at like 13, and like just craziness that I was hearing that I could relate to, And I picked up a chip at that meeting. And then the next morning that night we went to a diner afterwards, and it was me and these two girls, and one was about my age and one was younger. And, I didn't talk a lot. I don't think I could. But one of them told me, her story, which was like my adult story of being a mom and being a bartender and leaving my kid and the lifestyle that I was leading. And the other one was a lot younger, and she was telling like my younger story of when I was just crazy and wild and as a teenager. And it was very interesting now looking back to see how, like, I feel like I have two separate stories sometimes, and it was like God made that moment where there was both of them right in my face. And so the next day I went to another meeting with her. I quit my job at the bar. I changed my phone number. Like, I was just like, yeah. But I don't think I had any intentions of this being long term. And whatever she told me to do, I just did it. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's because I spent so much of my life with no guidance and no like authority figure or parents, that I wanted somebody to tell me what in the hell to do. I wanted somebody to instruct me on how to live. Because I don't think I ever got that after about 12 years old. And so anything she told me to do, I did. I asked her to be my sponsor, and we went through the steps the best I think I could. And when it came time to do my fifth step, I think I did it as best I could, but I had so much stuff suppressed and just pushed down so far that I did not have the experience that I hear a lot of people talk about they had. And after I did that fifth step, I became very miserable, and I was full of so much sadness and anger for everything that had happened in my life. Because I think what happened for me was it was the first time that I acknowledged these things. It was the first time I acknowledged that I was sexually abused, that I was raped, that I had had an abortion, that I had been kidnapped, that my mom picked my abuser over me. It was the first time I had ever said, this really happened, And I think what would have been my best bet then was to go into therapy. But I didn't do it immediately. But anyway, so a lot of pain came the next couple months, and I ended up trying to take out charges on my stepfather because, as I said, I was very angry. And I went to the DA and wanted to reopen the case because there was not a statute of limitations. And they assigned a detective to my case, and she walked in the room, and as soon as we made eye contact, we both filled with tears because she was the same detective when I was 14, 15, 13 that would come and check on me when I was in the hotel rooms or when I was running away. She'd take me home, and we knew immediately who each other were. And she was the detective on my case, and so we had a lot of conversations that I don't think I would have had with another detective. And come to find out, he had failed a polygraph, admitted to everything. It was all on file, so I thought this is going to be a breeze. But then the DA refused to reopen the case because when I was 16, I had my chance, and I decided to run away back to Florida. So that anger was just doing this, and I was not putting anything in my body. I was trying to work steps, and I was going to meetings constantly, but that anger was just building. And I ended up getting another sponsor, and without even knowing this, it was like I don't think I picked her myself because she had the same childhood I did. And for the first time in my life, I knew she could relate to my feelings. And I knew that she understood why I drank the way I did, how I felt when I didn't, what I felt like now. She understood all those things. And then we did do a thorough fifth step. And then I did get some relief and some peace. And now I can look back. For so long I was so mad that I went through all that stuff with the DA for them to say no. But I can see it now as I finally did my part, because as a kid, when you do your fourth step and it's like, what's your part? Well, that pissed me off because I didn't have a part in that, But today I can see that I had a part in not letting myself heal. And so when I did all that, as far as the DA and everything, I made an amends to that little girl that was never protected or given any kind of solution to the pain that she was in. And then after that, I did start therapy, which I don't think I would have ever done unless I came into this program first. Which has just brought so much relief and peace and joy, to my life. I've had to make some hard decisions after that about whether or not to continue a relationship with my mom. I wrote my stepfather a letter and sent it to him to try to get it out of me and into him. I looked very deeply into why I drank the way I did. There's been moments where and I've not had to, but I chose to overanalyze and try to figure out if I drank because I'm alcoholic or if I drank because of trauma. And what I realize today, the truth of the matter is people go through what I went through, and they don't necessarily drink and use the way I did. Somebody said to me the other day, I don't think you would have done it for 20 years to try to fix that area of your life if you weren't an alcoholic. And the other thing is that today, I've done all this therapy and I don't have a desire to drink, but there's moments where it's more about how I'm living my life, regardless of the alcohol. And I don't think I would make the right decisions or live my life correctly unless I was in the rooms. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm going to tell you where I've been the past few weeks. I've really been questioning if I need to be here. I guess I've got about 3.5 years and I've become a little bored. And I didn't want to speak tonight because, I hear people say things in the rooms or speak, and I'm like, oh, they're just talking it, they're not living it. And I kind of felt like that's where I was at right now because I didn't have this fire for AA anymore. like I had when I, my first year or whatever. And I guess that's why I'm getting emotional, because it just hit me. Exactly why I need to be here. So thank you. Okay. So I guess it was about a year and a half ago, I had gotten depressed, just over different things. I didn't get my kids back when I came into AA. I did get them back. I didn't physically get them back into my home, but I have a relationship with them today. But about a year ago, I started getting really depressed, and I was staying in the bed, and I was very close to drinking. And, this is where I become very thankful for the network that I built when I first came in the rooms. And it just shows me the importance of building those connections and reaching out to people and building the network of women that I built. Because during that period, I had somebody that I could be completely honest with and not feel like I was being judged, and I felt like they understood. And the fact that I had somebody that I was honest with is when I got into that place, they were able to pull me out. And I remember we were talking about this at dinner, and I was laying in bed, and I had been there for a couple weeks, and, I was plain sick with my work and everything, and I wasn't taking very good care of my daughter. And my sponsor walked into my bedroom at night, and I sat up, and I'm like, what are you doing here? And, some people in my network called her, and she walked in, and she looked at me, and she said, you want Jack or you want tequila? Or do you just want to go on back out there to the streets and get whatever there is? And it pulled me out just enough, because the next day I lost my job. And I think that if that would not have happened that night and I lost my job that next morning, I would have drank that day. And that's just how my God works in my life. Like, I can see so clearly that there is no other explanation than a higher power on how these things work, now that I'm making choices to live my life the way I should. Anyway, so she did that, and I got serious, and since I didn't have a job, I had the opportunity to do 90 and 90 again and make 2 or 3 meetings a day. And that's what I did, is I got right back in and I went hard. And I had the opportunity. I was living with someone at the time, and I got a severance package and stuff, and so I didn't have to go immediately back to work. So I got the opportunity to start working this program really hard, therapy really hard. It's funny, my sponsor picks on me because on my 5th step that I did with her, one of my resentments was that I never got to go to treatment, which I was offered, I just refused. But my brothers went to like 20 treatments, so then when I came up, they were like, that shit don't work, So I never got the opportunity, and I felt like, they cared less about me because they didn't go to those lengths to try to get me sober. So anyway, last August, I went to treatment sober. But I went to treatment for trauma and PTSD, and I went to this huge treatment center in Pennsylvania and went through this program for a week that was from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. It was straight therapy and program, and it completely changed my life. And, the reason I went is it was highly suggested to me to get a fast-track unit instead of just poking at it, every other week in therapy, is I needed to go, like, Zoom. And, I didn't have money to do that kind of stuff. And the doors just opened. Something that normally cost $3,000 ended up only costing me like $400. And it was made possible. And it seriously changed my life. And after I got out of there, not out of there, but after I came back home, I was able to make some decisions to make my life healthier. Because there were some things that were a part of my life that didn't need to be. And so I made some changes last September, and I think that's where I learned exactly what faith means, and depending on a higher power instead of depending on myself or what I knew as survival tools before this program. And it's all where everything's worked out. Everything that I thought, oh my God, how is this going to happen? It happened. And I think that just has to do with the way that the relationship I have with my higher power now, and where I'm putting my trust. I'm putting my trust in him instead of myself or this person or that man or this job or whatever, And today I have a 17-year-old, a 14-year-old, and an 8-year-old, all girls. And I have the best relationship I could imagine with each one of them. For somebody that grew up without a mom, pretty much, the fact that I can be a mom to each one of them and have the relationship with that I have with them is incredible. My 17 and my 14-year-old don't live with me. They do come every other weekend and here and there when they want to, now that one of them's driving. But when we are together, the interaction we have and the time that we spend together is like, I can't really put words to it. Like, it's incredible. Like, first of all, they want to be around me, and they're 17 and 14, you know. When I was 17, I mean, me and my friends in the program were like, can you imagine being 14 and 17 and acting like that? And I'm like, no. I don't know. I guess it's normal, but it's weird. But, you know, my 17-year-old daughter wrote me a letter Mother's Day. I guess it was like 2 years ago, or last Mother's Day or something. Anyway, she wrote me a letter. I have it framed in my office, and she told me that I have taught her that anything is possible. And when you put determination, willingness, and a higher power in the mix, that you can change anything about you or your life. And then she went into how everybody, because she looks like a mini-me. And so she constantly gets, you're just like your mom. You look, you know, from her other side. And she put in the letter that was a compliment. And no matter whether they were saying it thinking that it was negative to her, it was a good thing that she was just like me. And then my 8-year-old daughter, I guess the first year and a half that I got sober, she was in a meeting every day pretty much. So she's like a little AA mascot, and sometimes she thinks she's my sponsor. And she'll, you know, we sit down to eat, and she says the Serenity Prayer. And, you know, she tells me when you might want to go to a meeting, or have you talked to Kate, my sponsor? Have you talked to your sponsor lately? Anyway, it's cute. It can be annoying, but it's cute for most of the time. But anyway, she knows. At 8 years old, she has seen what AA can do in somebody's life. She remembers not being there with me, and she remembers what I was like when she was. And the same with my older girls. Like, they've seen the transformation, they've seen the change. Like, even my 17-year-old, she was dating a guy at one point, and she called me and she said, you know, I've seen alcoholism, and I'm not going to date alcoholism. So, you know, it's not a question in their head if it exists, if I have it. They know it because they've seen the change. They've seen the transformation. They see what I'm like when I put alcohol in my body and how I cannot stop, and they've seen what I'm like when I don't put alcohol in my body. And we have those conversations, you know, you need to be careful because you could have it, and you might take that first drink and might not be able to stop. And thank God, because of the people that are in their life today, if that does happen, hopefully not, but if it did, they would know immediately where to go. They wouldn't have to figure it out or guess or anything like that. And I know that there would be a seat sitting here for them to sit down in. I just went blank. Today, my dad, there was a point when I was in Florida, and I remember I went to go see my dad. I think I was out of money and needed a couch to like sleep on for a couple of days or something, I don't know. And I went and knocked on the door, and this person came to the door, which was not my dad or my stepmom, and I asked for my dad, and he was like, honey, they don't live here. And I had found out that my dad had left and moved back to North Carolina, and I was the only one there in Florida. And, I think I came in here and I resented my mom so much that I put my dad on a pedestal, and I blamed myself a lot for the relationship we didn't have, because I caused a lot of chaos in his life. But today, I work for my dad. My dad lives in Texas, but I work for him from here, and I go and fly there every couple months, and, we're building this relationship. I'm 35, and all of a sudden I have my dad back, which is pretty amazing, and I don't think I could if it wasn't for this program in my life, and as well as he's had it touch his life through my stepmom and stuff as well. And, when I go there, I go to a meeting with my stepmom, and that is like, I didn't think I would like it. Nobody wants to go to a meeting with their mom. But you know what? I saw a different side of her. When I was in there, and she was chairing a meeting, and hearing her share, it was like, oh my God, she's me. Like, I'm her. Like, we have this bond that I never knew we had until this very moment. And since I went and visited, I guess it was a couple months ago that I went for the first time, but we talk on the phone like every other day, and we talk program stuff, and now I have another person in my network who also knows me before I got sober and knows me as a kid, and, has another bond, which is pretty incredible. Another thing is, my brothers are both out there right now. My brothers come in and out of the program, but I've had to learn how to set those boundaries, which has been hard for me to figure out what the difference is from detaching and abandoning. But it's through you guys, when I share that in a meeting, you guys giving me feedback on your experience to know how to handle that and how to not let it completely control my feelings and all that stuff. Because I think if I didn't have the program and I had all that going on, I'd be right there all up in it, and trying to figure out, is it okay? Do I need to do it with them? Do I need to save them? But you guys teach me how to handle those kind of things. You teach me how to handle relationships with people at work. You teach me how to handle relationships with my kids, my friends, my family. You teach me what relationships I don't need, which ones are unhealthy, and it's okay not to have a relationship with every single person I come into contact with. And that's all stuff that I did not learn as a kid. I just didn't. Nobody gave me the tools. I didn't learn any of that stuff until I came into these rooms. And that's one thing that I feel very strongly about, is that these rooms has given me a family. I have people in the rooms that represent like a mother figure to me, or a grandmother, or a brother, or a sister, or, whatever. And I finally gotten to a point that I can accept that I don't have to have a family that I was born into, but I can have a family today that truly loves me and has my best interest at heart. So those are just a few of the things that AA has given me that I don't want to lose. So I'm going to keep coming back. And thank you for asking me to speak.